Hello, and welcome to our fifth 2024 Chartered Accountants Worldwide Network USA Beyond Accounting online presentation. I am David Powell of Chartered Accountants Worldwide Network USA, based in Boston, Massachusetts. Today's presentations look at three aspects of networking, with a goal of sharing with you tips and ideas that you can consider using yourself. We will have three sessions of about 20-25 minutes each, followed by Q&A. Our three sessions are on the do's and don'ts of networking, getting the most from networking events, and building a personal brand and social media. How to get the most out of LinkedIn and social media in general. In joining this event, you will have been prompted to sign into Slido. This is an app we use to do Q&A and polls. We will also use details of those who sign in to send out digital badges you can add to your LinkedIn profile if you so choose. You can also reference the badge in attending this event as part of your own CPD activity. You will also see a control panel located at the top right of your screen, if you're on a laptop, or at the bottom of your screen on a mobile device. The panel has tabs for Q&A and polls, and you can enter questions under the Q&A tab. If you see someone ask a question you like, if you like the question, it raises it up the list we're looking at. In the Q&A session, we'll be looking at this list in selecting questions for our speakers to respond to. We also have copies of the slides being presented today available for download underneath the screen that is playing this webinar. During the event, we will be asking 5 polling questions and we'll give you about 20 seconds to answer. If you have any issue answering the polls, log a comment under Q&A so we can timestamp your participation. For those of you that are US CPAs and have requested CPE credits, answering the polling questions is a requirement to evidence you have attended the event. At the end of the event, as you exit, we will also give you a short survey. We appreciate your feedback. Let us know how we do. I'd like to add that for today's event, we feature fellow chartered accountants, David Freeman, based in Washington, D.C., Nancy Chakabuda, based in Indianapolis, and Veronica Bilby in Oxford, England. To kick things off, let's do our first polling question. So polling question 1 is, how often do you go to networking events on average? Once a month or more, once a quarter, once every 6 months or less, or I avoid networking events? What I'd now like to do is introduce our first speaker, David Freeman, FCA, an ICAW member who is also part of our executive leadership team and chapter president for Washington, D.C. David is a senior account executive at RDA, a digital consultancy based in Maryland that partners with its clients on their journey towards real digital transformation by leveraging its team of strategists, designers, technologists to deliver tangible outcomes. David has been with RDA since his arrival in the United States in 1995 and has served in various roles during that time. Prior to RDA, David spent 16 years at Arthur Andersen's London office in the firm's audit and business advisory practice. After starting out in the audit arena, David spent much of his tenure leading a variety of business and information technology consulting engagements in areas that included in computer risk management and IT strategy. His topic today is getting the most from networking events, and now let's look at the results of the poll. And it looks like once every 6 months or less is the leader, with about 44%. That might change when we finalize it. And David, let me now pass to you.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. I hope you find this useful. I've been doing networking for many, many, many years, and like most people, I did it with trepidation to begin with. But once I figured it out, once I learned what to do, I do relish the opportunity to go to networking events now. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll have some of the tips and tricks and traps that will be relevant for your networking. Networking is a really important thing for most people, and you only regret that you're not doing enough when you really need to, which is, for example, when you're looking at transitioning from a job or whether you've got to do business development activities. So I'm going to try and help you and encourage you to take part in more networking events. And for those of you who are doing only once or twice a year, I'm going to see if you can get you up there and do something that's both regular and enjoyable. They are an incredible opportunity to connect with others, grow your professional network. But what we'll do in this presentation is explore, where you go, how you do networking, how you maximize the time at those events, and what follow-ups you should do. So the learning objectives for this presentation are how to identify and select networking events, how to prepare yourself, what to do when you get there, how to engage people, and what to do after the event's over. So this was pretty typical. This is my experience, probably your experience too. You go to a networking event, and the first thing you find is when you start talking to people, it's just full of salespeople and recruiters, whether those salespeople are trying to sell you insurance, banking, you name it, they'll go to a networking event and try and sell it to you. Sometimes it's really difficult to figure out who to go and talk to, particularly when there are groups of people. Do you just go into that group headlong and hope that someone notices you, or what do you do? Getting stuck talking to someone you'd rather not, very, very common, and it's really difficult to get away. We'll talk about that. But really, the key thing is you might just come away feeling, you could have been doing something more productive than going to an event. You've just wasted your time. And not knowing when to leave is another issue, because you don't want to leave too early, but you also don't want to be the last person in the room. So networking is really both science and art. There are skills here, and once you've mastered them, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to participate in them. But you really want to try and create something that's repeatable, that you don't really have to think too hard about doing. You've got to understand how to attack a room full of people. You've got to have an elevator pitch, the short text that you use when someone says, well, what do you do? You've also got to be reading body language, because that's a good indicator of when someone's had enough of you, or whether they are really interested in what you have to say. Soft skills are really important. Your appearance makes a difference, and really making that right first impression when you meet someone is the key to establishing a rapport with them. Let's talk about choosing the right places to network. Well, networking is a bit like most things, which is the more you pay, the better quality you'll get. Senior executives do prefer to network with their peers. And that's something that they do because they're looking to learn things from their peers. They're looking to establish long-term relationships with those peers, so they've got people to talk to and consult with. The other factor is that the more you pay to get into an event, the better the quality of the people. If you've ever gone to something that's free and compared it with something where the entrance fee is, a couple $100, you'll have noticed right away that you get a completely different group of people at those kinds of events. And you get the ones who are there for a reason, not just there for the food and drink. Where to go? Well, there are all sorts of organizations, associations that you can actually use to network. In fact, when you go outside, you've got to really think about it as any interaction with people as truly networking, because you'll always be surprised about who you do bump into. The other thing I'd say is that the optimal thing is to join an organization and go to their events regularly, because people will start noticing you. You will form relationships there, and they do honestly pay in the long term. I've been a member of a couple of organizations. I've networked there frequently, and you do form relationships, and they stick. Just a few weeks ago, I found someone on LinkedIn who I knew from one of these associations. I haven't spoken to for several years, but it turns out that he had just started work with one of my clients. So I was able to contact him on LinkedIn. He contacted me right back. We had an excellent conversation. I learned what he was doing. And, there's the possibility that we might do business in the future again, directly with his group. He was also mentioning other people's names, so he will be a good referral source. Those things really count. And I do encourage you to not only form those relationships that you can, but just keep in touch with people over the long haul. As they change jobs, they may become potential clients for you. And indeed, I've actually got a lot of business out of people that I've met at networking events, just followed around. And it can take years, but at some point those stars align and that person will need your help. So let's talk about preparing for a networking event. First thing, dress appropriately, look smart. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be in a suit if you're a man, or really, nice sort of upscale clothing if you're female. But just try to dress one step above what you think the people in the room will look like, because it does really make a difference. People, I don't know, people tend to gravitate to those that look a little bit sharper and more nicely dressed. The other thing you've got to do is think about how long you want to stay and what your goals are. And really, once you've achieved your goals, if you've met 3 or 4 people and had good conversations, got their cards, got some follow up, maybe that's it. Maybe that's all the time you need. But do not just linger around in the hope that something happens. Be specific about your goals. Turn off your cell phone. Cell phones are a prop and a distraction, and they really are an indicator of how interested someone is in what's going on. And we'll talk about a little about those people who are on cell phones are actually really good targets. The other thing, and this may sound really strange to do, but I do it and it makes a big difference. Before you get out of your car, once you've arrived, look in the rearview mirror and smile at yourself. You will be amazed how long that smile lasts. It will last you all the way to get into the room that you're going. And it really does make you look more approachable and confident. So we go into the venue. You want to do the big entrance, you want to project confidence, you want to look good, you want to be smiling, you're going to have a good sort of upright posture as you mean business. You go to the desk where they have badges or name tags. You pick that up, you thank the people behind the desk, because you never know when you might need them. They're usually from the organization who's running the networking. Place the network tag in a prominent position. Sometimes they have a habit of falling off depending upon the material you're wearing. So keep your eye on it, but just make sure it's very visible so that someone who looks at you can actually see your name. If you go with someone else to a networking event, you're not there to speak to them. Just split up. It's far more productive and efficient that way, and you really don't need to talk to them. You can talk to them afterwards if you want to. Now, who do you approach? You've got a room full of people. You've got people around the periphery of the room. You've got threesomes. You've got big groups where someone seems to be dominating that group. Well, the best thing, the easy pickings, the low-hanging fruit are those people who are looking at their phones. I mentioned not looking at their phones, or they're on their own, just hanging around. They might be drinking and eating. Just walk up to them, and they will appreciate someone talking to them. Threesomes, I can't say that, are a little more challenging, because you've got to figure out when to break into that threesome, if you can indeed, because those people might have a relationship already, and you might be an outsider. You may be walking into a group conversation that you shouldn't do. So good idea to just step back. If you can hear what they're talking about, don't just thrust yourself into the group. Stand on the very perimeter of the group and wait till you almost get invited in to join, but just don't barge in. The ones that are really challenging are couples and large groups. So in couples, you don't know whether you're just walking to 2 people, just having a personal private conversation. And large groups, typically you'll find a group, around someone who's doing all the talking, and it's like that's the important person. And you could sort of edge your way into that group, but the trouble is you're probably going to be stuck with just hearing what that person has to say and really not getting an opportunity to interact. So my recommendation would be aim for those people on their own. They're probably nervous networkers, and threesomes second, but really do avoid the couples and large groups unless you really know, that's the groups that you want to be going after. So you walk up to someone, you break the ice, and we'll talk about what we do there in a moment. But be respectful. If they're not interested, then don't force yourself on them. Just retire gracefully. And the other thing, as I mentioned before, and I'll mention again, have your elevator speech so that when they ask you what you do, that you've got that nicely down in a very succinct way. So we introduce ourselves. Hi, my name's David Freeman. What's your name? And they give you your name. Repeat their name back. If you're like me, I forget people's names very, very quickly. It's actually something to do with your brain that you forget people's names. So say it back, repeat it. Nice to meet you, so-and-so. And you'll find that it will stick, and you don't have to keep on looking at their name tag to remind yourself of their name. Good body language, very important. Synchronize those styles. You may have been aware of this before. If they make a movement, you naturally sort of make the similar sort of movement. Ask about them. Ask real questions, genuine questions about what they do, and probe a little bit. You don't have to be nosy, but get them to do the talking. And eventually they will ask you, well, what do you do? Don't volunteer it until they ask you. They will do it. And just keep it short and let them ask you the questions. It is always better to have them talking, because they will get bored of you talking, and people love to talk. When you've finished, or beginning, honestly, get their business card if they have a business card, or contact information. Never does any harm to have a little notebook with you. I don't recommend using your phones to do contact exchange of business cards, because it's just not going to work. You're going to have an Android, they've got an iPhone, and you're going to end up in a little bit of a technical spaghetti when you really don't want to be doing that. So I do recommend, in this case, the old-fashioned way, pencil and paper. But when you're with people, just be confident, be yourself. That's very important. Just don't pretend to be someone you're not. Keep focused, stay looking in their eyes, keep smiling, be warm and approachable, show real interest in what they're saying, be positive. If you get a chance to give them compliments, do so. If you make a commitment to them that you're going to do something afterwards, make sure that they know you're going to follow up and do it on a timely basis. And just leave them with the thought that, hey, I like this person. I'd really like to meet them again or do business with them in the future. That's how you want to make a lasting impression. The other thing is give before you get. If there's any opportunity for you to give them something worthwhile, you might want to introduce them to someone, or make them aware of something, or send them something. Just make sure that you give before you get. It always goes down well. And just to reiterate, more listening, less talking. Just let them tell you what they want to tell you. Ask really good questions, and you'll find that really does make a difference. And do focus on the person and building a relationship with them. Don't treat it as a transaction that you're going to just get something from them, walk away. Make sure that you've got a follow-up step, that if they are someone that you want to have a relationship with, do something to make sure that relationship does take place. And finally, the test of good manners is putting up with bad ones. So if there is someone that's a little bit, dare I say, obnoxious, then that may be a time to withdraw. Maybe they don't express themselves in a way that's compatible with your beliefs. Whatever it is, just don't waste your time and gracefully disengage. Food is always on offer at networking events. Don't eat it. If you're going to eat at all, just do it at the very end before you leave. Eating is a distraction in many ways. Firstly, if you're like me, you cannot juggle food, drink, and talking at the same time. It's impossible to do. And I do recommend that you avoid eating. You're not there to eat, you're there to network. The other thing is that, and this has happened to me, you can have a little accident. You can get food on your clothes. You can just end up looking like you've got a stain on something, look a bit unprofessional, something that's creamy or whatever on the lapel, and it really is a little bit embarrassing. The other thing is, while you're eating, you just may miss out. You want to focus on what you're doing, so it's really important to make sure that you're in the moment and you're not in the dinner plate. Alcohol's another thing. What I'll do is I'll grab a drink when I go there. I'll hold on to it. I'll just sip occasionally, but I strongly recommend you avoid any significant amount of alcohol consumption because you never know quite where that will end up. Certainly have a drink, have a couple of drinks, use it as a prop because it only takes one hand and you can still shake hands when you're drinking. But I do strongly recommend that you limit your alcohol consumption. And if you meet someone who you really don't, you're not getting on with them or you feel like you've had enough, here are a couple of methods just to, gracefully disengage. If you want to introduce them to someone else that you met that you thought they might find interesting, go ahead and do that. And just hang on there until they are engaged and say your goodbyes. Or you can do I'm sure you want to talk to other people. I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. So I really enjoyed the conversation and goodbye. So that way you're not walking away without leaving the situation really cold. You're saying goodbye. You're saying, that see you some other time, but don't waste your time on people that are not going to give you anything, not going to be useful to you, and you, quite frankly, can be rather boring. But on the other hand, don't disengage in a way that is confrontational or mean-spirited or honestly rude. The thing to remember, any contact at a networking event is a good contact. They may not be there to give you business, but they might know someone who might be a prospect. They may be a good partner. They might do something that's complementary to your business. They may change jobs, as I said earlier. You want to keep in touch with them. They might be a reference down the road about you personally. And they may just be able to give you information that you may not be aware of and could make use of. So, don't dismiss people just because they work in a business that isn't quite the same as yours, or the expertise that's the same as yours, whatever it is. Think more broadly about people and how they might be able to help you. And then afterwards, follow up is very, very important. Make sure that you write some notes on the business cards so you don't forget, because if you collect too many business cards, you're never going to remember one person from the next. So make some notes, think about what you did, how you did it, there are improvements that you can make for the next one, and then follow up on those action items and make sure you do it on a timely basis. If nothing else, it shows a little bit of enthusiasm and interest in the person rather than waiting a week or two. By then, they'll probably have forgotten you anyway. And do organize and store your contacts in some kind of information management. You can do them in Outlook, whatever system that you use. Make sure you send those follow-up emails and do stay in touch regularly because, as I said earlier, it pays. And finally, just some final thoughts. It's not networking is not one size fits all. The different events call for different techniques. It doesn't work for everyone, but it is a very, very important aspect of business life. If you don't need it now, you will need it. You will need to learn how to network for your own personal benefit. And just keep practicing. There's no real downside of fluffing a networking event or conversations. But once you get good at it, you'll enjoy it. And it is fun and it is lucrative. And if you know how to work that room and other people haven't been through this training, you will benefit greatly. So that's just about the end of what I have to say. Hope you found these few tips in there are useful. And I'll pass it back to David.
Thank you, David. And now it's time for our second poll. Polling question 2. What is your self-confidence level when you first walk into a room full of people, most of whom you don't know? Very confident, somewhat confident, not too confident, or terrified? While you're answering that, let me introduce our second speaker, Nancy Chakabuda. Nancy is part of our executive team and serves as vice president, and she's also chapter president of our Indianapolis chapter. Nancy is a senior director in Cummins Inc.'s Global Center of Accounting and was with Cummins in South Africa before moving to the United States. Prior to that, she was with RSM and was a top 35 under 35 chartered accountants finalist in South Africa in 2020, where she won the lead category award. She is a self-motivated, transformational leader who has experience in leading and building global and diverse teams and influencing organizational change across different regions and cultures. Nancy also has strong expertise and a passion for coaching and people development. She carries out formal and informal mentorships and initiatives to develop talent in and outside her organization, extending her expertise to nonprofit organizations. She has outstanding interpersonal and communication skills and will today be speaking on building a personal brand. So now let's go to the results of the poll. And it looks like somewhat confident is out there with 43%. And with that, Nancy, let's pass to you.
Thank you very much for that great introduction, David. And good day, everyone. I am very, very excited to be here. Just going to try and share my screen before I start. Can you see my screen, David? Good to go. Thank you. Thank you for the great introduction, David. So good day, everyone. I am so excited to talk to you about a topic that I'm very, very passionate about, and one that is very closely intertwined with the topic of networking, which is building a personal brand. As a professional or an entrepreneur, as you embark on your journey of networking, just being clear on your personal brand, what you represent is critical, as it helps you really just to communicate and connect with others that have similar interests, right? And most importantly, it helps you to mobilize a movement of support for yourself, for your business. It helps you build that intangible benefit that's referred to often as relationship currency that can really just open up future opportunities for you. And so before I get into it, I just wanted to give a brief overview of the items I'll be focusing on today. So we'll talk a little bit about what is a personal brand, where do you start, how do you strengthen your personal brand, what are the common pitfalls, and then the benefits of building a personal brand and how that ties into networking. And so to set the scene, I wanted to just ask a few thought-provoking questions. The concept of personal brand seems very, very abstract and intangible. So I wanted to just start off the session with a few thought-provoking questions, as I mentioned. And so, a few questions that come to mind when I think of personal brand is, what do you as an individual stand for? What are you known for in your professional life? What experiences and skills do you have that differentiate you? And what makes you you? And so based on this, a personal brand really refers to, a holistic view of yourself. And because it is so intertwined with the person that you are, you really cannot separate it from your personal values as an individual. And so as a result, you often hear the concepts of personal brand and authenticity being spoken of together. And so essentially having a solid personal brand demands that you embrace your true self, your unique parts of yourself, and show up to the world as who you are, right? Fearlessly and consistently, which is very important. And that is really your authentic self. And so on this slide, you will recognize, a few faces. On this slide, you'll recognize a few faces that are very familiar to all of us. And in my view, these are individuals that who really represent strong personal brands. There's no question as to what these individuals stand for. They have been so successful in building their brands, and most of us will answer consistently, right, what their personal brands embody. Jeff Bezos, who is famously known as the founder of Amazon, as a leader in innovation and customer excellence. Oprah Winfrey, a philanthropist, empowerment icon, and media leader. And last but not least, Nelson Mandela, an embodiment of servant leadership, peace, and an advocate for diversity and inclusion. And so the common themes across all these three individuals that strengthens and increases credibility of their brands is, firstly, their heightened awareness of self, and secondly, their will and advocacy to live authentically, again, the word authenticity, and fully as who they are. I really like the quote by Dan Schawbel, an author, that just truly encapsulates the personal brand and authentic dynamic, the interrelation there, which is the only brand that you can sustain is one that is authentic to you. So I wanted to deep dive a little bit into the components of a personal brand, And so firstly, starting on the left there, firstly, your career capital represents any skills, any knowledge, any credential, any personality traits that can differentiate you. The key word is differentiation. And any resources really that can produce economic value for you today and in the future, right? And it's so important to note that the concept of expert influence that comes with enhancing your skills, your knowledge, your credentials, and your qualifications. And that expert influence really plays a lot into building credibility for your personal brand. The second aspect, which I mentioned, your network is a critical component of your personal brand. So believe it or not, it's not only you investing in your personal brand, it's really about the network you build around you to support your growth, to endorse you and your credibility, which is why all the key points that you're hearing today from my colleagues, they're very, very important on networking, creating the right network. And I always remind those that I mentor that your network is really your net worth, so this component is really about your relationship capital in your immediate and your extended network. The third component is having a growth mindset. I cannot stress the importance of having a growth mindset. You cannot have a strong personal brand without a foundation of wanting to be better, right? And of course, the initiative to continuously improve yourself. That growth mindset helps you to further establish the credibility. Again, with your personal brand, it's about credibility, the credibility of your personal brand. It helps you keep in touch with the trends, in your field, and just keeps you relevant, right, as an individual. The last component, as I mentioned, is authenticity. Again, the thread of authenticity is showing up here, and that's showing up in all situations, the true version of yourself. So as you go to networking events, as you build up your social media page, how are you showing the true version of yourself, right? And that is something that's consistent with your core values. What this does for you, it builds consistency in the version that you're putting out there, whether it's on social media, whether it's at networking events. And of course, it builds again into that key concept of a credible personal brand, right? People reciprocate better to people that are consistent. So as you network, what brand are you projecting of yourself? And are you consistent with everyone you meet in your behaviors and in what you're projecting on social media? So I'm hoping by now, you're all asking, Nancy, where do I start, right? And so we all know the famous quote by Benjamin Franklin, which is, failing to plan is planning to fail. So when it comes to building your personal brand, it does take a high level of planning and continuous iteration as you measure the progress. I like to call it the 4 No's, which is what you see on the slide now. And so the first know is know yourself and know the gaps, right? As you look at the 4 components that I presented on the previous slide, what are the gaps that you have? Rate yourself out of 10, right? And what gaps do you have? How strong is your network, right? Rate yourself out of 10. How strong are your skills? Do you need to study further? Do you have a skill that you can grow into an expert influence? Just really honing in on connecting with yourself on a deeper level. Then the second know is know where you want to be, right? So draw up your personal vision. I like to call it a personal vision statement, right? What do you aspire to be? What's your vision with your professional and your personal life? Are they aligned, or do you need to align them? Again, speaking to that authenticity. For example, do you want to explore social entrepreneurship for a cause that is close to your heart and values? Is that something that you're demonstrating through the networking that you're doing and through your social media? So all of that needs to be in alignment, again, building onto that consistency for your personal brand. The third no is know the goals, right? So building your personal brand is a journey. I think people are very quick to want, build up their personal brand over 2 days, 3 days. It's not possible. It's a journey, right? And I can tell you, I want to be a CFO one day, but that being a long-term goal, I need to be thinking about all the micro goals that I need to put in place in the next few years that will gradually build me up to that credible brand. So what is my roadmap? What do I need to do from a networking standpoint, right? To get me the right network and influence to get where I want to be. The last no is know the actions. So the actions, as I mentioned before, do you need to study further? Do you need to build your career? When it comes to networking, do you need to attend more seminars that are aligned to your interests? Can you take up engagements, speaking engagements at industry events? It's important to map out and to be intentional in your actions. And most importantly, just periodically evaluate yourself on the success of your actions. Have those self-check-ins, intentional self-introspection, and question yourself, what have I done? What have I done what I wanted to do? Why did I not do it? What do I need to do to correct that? So I'm hoping from now it's becoming a little more apparent that your personal brand transcends your work environment, right? So it's not just who Nancy is in the work environment, it's who Nancy is outside of the work environment, right? It's really about me and my portfolio and how I present myself to others. So what I just shared brings in the powerful ingredient of consistency again, right? Which is on the right side here. These are some tips on strengthening your personal brand, some practical tips here. So consistency is very essential to strengthening your personal brand. Everyone knows that consistency is the most powerful ingredient to success. Athletes are successful because they're very consistent and they're practicing. And this equally applies to building a personal brand, right? So as you network, have a consistent story, whether it's on social media, as I mentioned, or in person. Remember that consistency is just fostered through authenticity. So always strive to present the true version of who you are. Engage consistently in and out of the workplace, as I mentioned before. People who know me personally know that I'm passionate about coaching and mentorship. They can tell you that without me even telling them, and so in and out of the workplace, I've been very intentional about consistently just seeking out those opportunities to mentor people. And not only because it's my brand, right? But it's because it's part of my value. So it comes naturally to me as well, And so action consistency is also important. So your industry contributions, the networking events that you go to, as David mentioned, it's good to have a variety of networking events you go to, but really hone in, on a few of those so that you're not everywhere. So your network everything should all be aligned with your personal brand. So one question I will leave you with, as we look at this consistency part is, would anyone understand your personal brand today based on your social media and involvements? If your answer is no, it means that you've got work to do. And so secondly, just looking at the left now, another key ingredient, with this strengthening of your personal brand is really just that self-investment again, tapping into that self-investment, which can be both monetary and non-monetary, right? So as I mentioned before, through talking on the growth mindset aspect, invest in education and seminars that align to your goals and to just increase that credibility. And don't hesitate to volunteer, of course, time allowing, right? In and out of your organization for causes that you care about. Again, just increasing your credibility. And then lastly, carry out intentional networking, right? As touched upon throughout this webinar, invest in that relationship capital. It's very powerful, a very powerful part of your personal brand. And so some of the common pitfalls, at least that I've seen with individuals trying to build a personal brand are, firstly, not establishing an interest or expertise early enough in their careers or professional, personal lives. Again, this boils down to what is your purpose, right? The first no that I presented on the earlier slide, know yourself, right? So with networking, are you everywhere? Are you carefully targeting events that you want to attend? Again, just tapping into that consistency that we need, when it comes to building a personal brand. So don't go left just because others are going left. Just be consistent with who you are and what you want to build as a brand for yourself, right? And secondly, thinking that relationships will get them places. I mentioned relationship capital quite a few times in my presentation, which is very important, but you need to match your relationship currency with your performance currency, right? Ensure that you're thinking of ways to demonstrate your point of differentiation. so that people can take a chance on you, right? They've seen you demonstrating it. And then, of course, they've got the relationship with you. So it's very powerful to have both relationship and performance currency. And then thirdly, taking a one-dimensional view on building a brand, right? I mentioned that a personal brand transcends your work environment, right? Outside of your work, right? So it's not only one-dimensional, being based on your work within your organizations, but it has that multi-dimensional input where you need to actively seek opportunities and networking opportunities even outside of your organization to ensure that you're building that personal brand. And then lastly, a common pitfall is abandoning continuous learning, right? We are living in a changing world. As I mentioned, a growth mindset is very, very important. So seek ways to build onto that career capital, build those skills and expertise to really bed down that expert influence. And then lastly, the benefits of networking. So the benefits of networking is credibility. You build a really credible brand for yourself. It increases opportunities, career opportunities for yourself. It builds influence for yourself. I mentioned demonstrating is equally as important as just talking, making those relationships as you go out and network. And then it fosters loyalty, right? You build a movement behind you. Whether you're in an organization or you're self-employed, right? If you're consistent, you've got a credible brand, people will follow you. And then self-fulfillment, right? One of the quotes that I really like is, if you like what you do, if you do what you like, you will never work a day in your life, by Mark Anthony. And I think that's equally true in building your personal brand, which is why it's important to, just stick to your values, right? I mentioned I like coaching and mentoring. It doesn't feel like work to me because it's very close to what I believe in as an individual. And so through connecting your personal brand to your networking intentions, right, and actioning it, you can turn your connections into advocates, right? So on the right there, you see what type of advocates can be unlocked as you go on to your networking journey, and also promote your personal brand, right? So you can have promoters that really endorse and speak up for your brand and increase your visibility. So e.g. job referrals doesn't always come immediately, but if you've got the relationships, you've got the skills and expertise, that can be beneficial in the long term. You can have influencers that mobilize your brand if you're an entrepreneur, e.g. at industry events. And then you've got an accountability circle as well that just keeps you honest with where you are with your personal brand. Then, of course, you've got recipients of your personal brands or your target audience, which you should build as you do the 4 no's, the exercise on the 4 no's of what you have to offer, which really helps to foster that loyalty as well. And that is all from me. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, Nancy. And now let's run our third poll. And the third poll is, what % of HR and staffing professionals use LinkedIn for their recruiting efforts? While you're answering, let me introduce our third speaker, Veronica Bealby. Veronica used to be part of our executive team and was our secretary prior to relocating to the United Kingdom, where she is now based in Oxford. Veronica is juggling multiple ventures currently, and these include being a lecturer and tutor in financial reporting and accounting at Oxford University, being the program and project manager for Oxford Ministries for the Future, lecturing at the University of West London, and being the senior engagement manager for the Advisory Board Centre. She's also chair of the CANZ Regional Council in London, and today, Veronica will be presenting on social media and how to get the most out of LinkedIn. And now, let me have a look across here and see what the results are. Let's look at the results of our poll. And 40% of people went for 97%, and that was the correct answer. So with that, let me pass to Veronica. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Hi, everybody. It's lovely to have you here. And my part of the presentation is focusing mostly on social media. And I have to tell you, actually focusing mostly on LinkedIn. Why? Because it's the aspect of social media most used for professionals and for professional connections. However, I will state that I've seen more and more accountants utilizing other forums, and that's exciting to see because that's getting information about our profession to a wider audience. However, for this particular session, I'm going to focus on LinkedIn just so that you understand what we're looking at. And what we're going to cover in this session, by the end of the session, I'm hoping, or I'm trusting, that you'll feel more confident in discussing the importance of social media when you are networking, and that you'll be able to understand what the importance is. You'll be able to compose a brief one-to-one connection message. This is going to come in really handy after you've been to those events that David Freeman was telling you about, and you're then wanting to make a connection with anybody that you've met. And then also thinking about hashtags, following those hashtags on LinkedIn, and reposting articles that will help you to build this personal brand that Nancy's just been talking about, by helping your network understand what it is that you really are interested in and that you're an expert on. We'll start though with thinking about getting your profile in shape. This is mine. It's by no means a gold standard or perfect. I'm going to share with you some that I think are actually really gold standard, but I'm honest enough to show you mine as well. When you're thinking about, okay, well, when do I do this? Is it just when I'm looking for a new job? Well, I have to say, if you're looking at your LinkedIn profile and you're thinking about going along to one of these networking events that David Freeman's told us about, well, maybe think about getting that LinkedIn profile up to date before attending. That might be something that then you feel quite confident that if you do reach out and connect on LinkedIn afterwards, people will go, oh, I remember her, or I remember him. All right, this is up to date. So I'm going to show you a profile of a friend of mine, and he really does have a gold standard profile. It's this little badge here that says that he's a top voice. I asked him about this. I said, Naveed, what does this mean? And he said, oh, that's called a blue badge, Veronica. It's like one of these mysterious black Amex cards. You can't pay for them. You've got to have them. And that started a conversation between Naveed and I on how you get one of these. So to bring this to life for you, I'm going to share my screen, if it lets me, and show you a couple of my friends' profiles on LinkedIn as to how you can go about also getting a blue badge if you want one. Coming back to what Nancy said, though, Nancy talked about those 4 key components. And I want to really zone in on this. We've got our career capital, we've got that growth mindset, our authenticity, and our network. And all 4 of those come into LinkedIn, in my opinion, because this is a virtual representation of some of our network. We are showing off our career capital. We are needing to do this authentically. And that's the piece that I really want to hone in on. Have a think about how it is in line with this personal brand that you've really started to think about after Nancy's presentation. How is that going to be represented in an online space? You can utilize your LinkedIn profile. This is why I want to show you a couple of different profiles so that you can find something that resonates with you. You don't have to copy other people. You don't have to do what might not feel comfortable. Sometimes as accountants, we think, oh, this is a bit too showy for me. You don't have to do that. What I would say is show your best self in the best way that feels authentic to you. So this is my friend Annette. And one of the few points I want to pick out here, Annette utilizes under her name really well. You get quite a few words in here. Now, it's not just the fact that people are reading LinkedIn, but also, I'm sure we all know about these algorithms that are going through. And so potential recruiters, even other colleagues or potential friends on LinkedIn are utilizing algorithms to find people with similar interests and similar skills. So if you use the words here in your title to put some information about yourself, what you're known for, those will feed into those algorithms. Again, what feels okay for you and what you feel is authentic. Another thing here, this about section. I really feel that this is an underutilized section in our LinkedIn profiles. Now, okay, you think, well, who's going to take the time to read the full about section? Perhaps not many. So put the key information that you want read in this top paragraph. But then, as you see, You have so many words that you can use here. Thinking back to those algorithms, if you put keywords in your LinkedIn profile about section that really help to give people an idea of what you can do, the impact that you've made, and even the value that you'd add through simply them understanding you and knowing you, or for you working for them, this is going to help with algorithm searches. And then there are some people like me who click on this about and they'll have a good look. Scrolling down, the other point I want to say to you is that you get a really great amount of time to put licenses in, put your credentials in. Don't be shy. Make sure you show those off. That's then coming through to that career capital that Nancy was talking about, and your skills. You get a large number of skills that you can put. You can rank them. You can reorder them. It's something that really shows off what you're good at and what you should be known for. Now, maybe shows off is a word that feels uncomfortable for you. So let's say shows you in your best light, not in a negative sense, but really representing you in a virtual forum the best way possible. So here's Naveed's profile. What's the difference between someone like Naveed's and Annette's? Because as we can see, he's got over 20,000 followers. So Naveed said to me, I looked at his profile. He's got less words here in his title. So I thought, well, maybe it's not that. What was he doing? Naveed explained to me that he had to get very clever with the way he was posting. He utilized photographs a lot. He would put videos on. And I said, oh, Naveed, that all sounds very expensive. Are you spending a lot of money on this? He said, no. All of the photos that he utilizes were a group of friends. And Naveed said they went out for a coffee one day in a cafe. They found a good spot. And he said to his friends, can you take some pictures of us? I'm going to use these on my LinkedIn profile. So again, if you're thinking, oh, I don't have any professional photos, how about you shout your friends to a cup of coffee, or go to a nice cafe, can take some great pictures, and then you can think about utilizing those in your posts. The other thing that Naveed told me about is this idea called the social selling index. I'm going to switch back to my slides and show you the social selling index. Now, how do you find this? Because each and every one of us have a social selling index, even though we probably don't do sales. It's a bit scary to think of this, but we all do. If you Google in any search engine, or I've said Google, but if you use any search engine and type LinkedIn social selling index, the website will come up. You can then click on it and it will show you what your social selling index is. It looks like this. It comes up and it ranks. I must admit, I got a little bit of an ego boost when I saw this. This is my one. I must be doing okay. But Naveed is obviously doing better. It's not a competition. So you can look at this and it really helps you understand what it is about what you're posting and what's helping people get a really good sense for what you're doing. So here again, it refers to the idea of establishing your personal brand. The types of posts that you share on LinkedIn and the types of articles that you comment on really do influence your personal brand that you're showing to the world. Then it talks about your ability to find the right people. It talks about your ability to engage with insights and even build relationships. So how many new connections are you making? Are these connections that you then interact with? If this doesn't feel right for you and you don't want to do it, you can ignore the social selling index. But for example, if you are looking to have your profile viewed a little more because perhaps you're in a career transition, as I was quite recently, understanding some of these tips and tricks as to how to make your profile more visible, how that you show up in more recruiter searches, and even how people in your network get a better understanding of what you're capable of so that they can put your name forward for roles that come up. These are some of the tools that you can use and you might want to consider. So putting that there and then thinking about it. Once you've got that LinkedIn profile set up, ready to go, You've attended a networking event, you've shook hands nicely, you've made a connection, and you think, oh, you've got their business card, you've come home, and now you want to connect on LinkedIn. One of the things I will say, it's so tempting to just hit the connect button, especially if you're connecting on an app, but it doesn't give you the opportunity to introduce yourself properly. And I'm not sure about you, but certainly I've had a few connection requests come in and I look and I go, oh, where did I meet that person? I'm not sure I remember. And so I hesitate before I connect. If you're wanting to make sure that the person you've met remembers you, just put a quick little message. So thinking about what it is you might want to say. I've also recently had some messages come through which I can tell are pure AI. They get my job title wrong. They mention a wrong industry that might be about 10 years out of date on my career. So just knowing that if you've experienced that, someone else is going to. So if you're sending them a message, you want it to be authentic and you want them to be able to know that it was written by a human. What I would say, be specific, greet them specifically, remind them of where you met them. Oh, we met last Friday at that brilliant networking event. Remember we spoke about this speaker. You can put in some useful information there for them, and that will help them remember who you are. The other thing is always, I think, to leave them with a positive feeling about you. So I like to finish with a nice, pleasant ending where I'll say, I'm looking forward to connecting with you more. And again, say that quite authentically in the hope that when they do accept your connection request, then you can shoot them a message and go, oh, well, hi, then tell them a little bit more. And it becomes more of a conversation. So when you're sending a message, my thoughts are now you get a limited amount of characters, so you have to be succinct, but definitely be specific because it's memorable and people can definitely spot when it's AI. Moving on then, thinking about joining groups. I'm going to switch to my LinkedIn again, and I'm going to show you groups. So I'm in the My Network section of my own homepage. So from my homepage in LinkedIn, when I logged on, I then went straight to My Network. If you scroll up, LinkedIn offers you lots of people it thinks you might know. Here I am in London and it's still recommending contacts from my home university in Queensland in Australia, which is wonderful. But I must admit, I don't look at them so much. What I do look at is the groups. So LinkedIn sends you suggestions for groups that you might be interested in, and it's based on what you're searching. It's based on other groups that you might have joined. Funnily enough, I do work with the Financial Modelling Institute, so it sent me, oh, you might want to join this other financial modelling group. I also, as part of Oxford Ministry for the Future, I work on climate projects. So it's recommended these to me. If you see groups that you want to join, just click the join button. It really is that simple. Another way of getting good information out of LinkedIn is to follow hashtags. So when you're looking at your LinkedIn profile, and again, here's my homepage, here on the side, if you follow hashtags, it actually has a list of which hashtags you follow. You can tell I'm a proud chartered accountant there. Lots of hashtags that I follow. Again, it's really simple and easy to follow a hashtag. You can search it. So if you search, and always make sure you put the hashtag first. If I search chartered accountant, clearly I do this a lot. LinkedIn will now send me all of the posts of people who've put a hashtag of chartered accountant in their post. This is really cool and interesting. So again, then if you think, okay, I'm interested in following this hashtag, what does that mean? Well, if you follow the hashtag, it means that in your LinkedIn feed, you'll get more information posted by other people who are tagging chartered accountant. So if you click on it, it will show and it will come up. Now, in this case, it says, all right, Veronica, you're already following hashtag chartered accountants. So let me show you another one. This is a friend of mine. He's recently gone and learned about AI, artificial intelligence. This is something I want to know more about. He's put a hashtag here for me, artificial intelligence. I can click on it, and here it says, do you want to follow this? And I go, yes, I'd like to. It's that simple. Following hashtags then means that you're going to get more information and posts about these topics in your LinkedIn feed, which brings me back to our presentation. So here we are following hashtags. I've put some screenshots for you on the slides just so that you know how to do it. Forgive my messy highlighting. My colleagues often call me Picasso. I'm not so neat when I'm drawing on slides, but you get the point. Finally, when you're thinking about raising your profile on LinkedIn, building your personal brand, and helping yourself be found, people say, oh, create content. And you think, I'm a busy professional. I don't have enough time to be writing these big, long articles. I don't know what to do here. My thoughts are, you can cheat. Now, you don't just have to hit the repost with the automatic loop symbol on it. You can, but really that's you sharing articles that you like without putting any additional thought into it. I do it, I'll admit, because sometimes I'm quite busy, but I want to have that post on my network. I want it on my feed. However, when you're building your personal brand and when you're wanting people to know a bit more about you, why don't you find a post that you really like the look of, and then you can add your own thoughts and your own ideas about it. This demonstrates that you understand the topic, you have an opinion, and you have a thought about it. For example, I've got another one here ready to go for you. I'm really interested in sustainability, and I think many of us in the accounting community are. I also get to work with the Advisory Board Centre, so this partners really nicely with my interests, and it shows people what I like. Recently, the Advisory Board Centre team made a post about sustainable business practices. I really liked the article, I read it, and I agreed with it. So what I did was just added my thoughts about it and said to people, well, hey, do you know enough about this? This is something that I'm interested in. This helps show my network what I do, what I work with, and even the topics that I'm interested in. So again, thinking about that as you progress, it's a good way of showing your knowledge and your skills, really building on that career capital that you already have, demonstrating the growth mindset, but doing it authentically in a way that resonates for you. And that's really all I have for you. I know it's quite brief, hoping that it's been interactive and that you take some key takeaways from this. And now I'm going to pass us back to David.
Thank you, Veronica. And now it's time for our fourth poll. Polling question 4. How long does the average user spend on LinkedIn? 1.5 minutes, 7 minutes, 15 minutes, 3 minutes? Put your answer in there. And while you're answering that, I'd like to invite all our presenters back into the main stage because it's time for some Q&A. Okay, so let's count down to sharing the poll results. We'll do a 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So if we can close the poll, Matt, it looks like 15 minutes is the top item there. But Veronica, I don't know the answer, but I know you do. So can you share that with us?
But I like the fact that people obviously see that we're reading when we're on LinkedIn, and that's a good thing. 15 minutes is a little overzealous, though, according to the research. It is that 7.25 minutes. So I think the message there is when we're thinking about our own personal profiles on LinkedIn, we do still need to use the visuals and be succinct with our words, because whilst people are spending a little bit of time, it's not as long as 15 minutes.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So now we're in the Q&A space, and on screen, for those of you that have registered with gone into Slido, we have a whole bunch of questions that have been posted. If you go in and look at those questions, if you like them, they go higher up the list. And I'm going to start with the ones at the top of the list and also pick up some ones that I've got canned from earlier. So the most popular question at the moment, I think, David, this is for you from your presentation. How soon after the scheduled start of an event should I show up?
That's a good question. I tend to like showing up once there's been a few people there. So I wouldn't be there when it starts. I would get there probably 10, 15 minutes after. And just so that you've got a room that you can be productive in, because the worst thing is being on your own in a room and there's just one other person apart from yourself that you have to talk to, and you really don't, have much to talk to about that person. So wait till the room fills a little bit.
Excellent. Anything to add to that, Veronica?
I'll put the opposite here, David. I think it might be actually the fact that I have a background in the military and I just can't help myself. I'm always early. And to the point that the psycher team here in the UK, they know me because I actually turn up and I help them set up for their events. I'm there that early. But that's actually won me some friends, and I've managed to get along to some free psycher events. So it could also be the thing. But for me, I like to turn up and then I'll just stand about and chat. I think it's maybe really excessive FOMO. I just don't want to miss anything, so I'm always early.
Nancy?
I tend to agree with Veronica. So I'm a person who needs to psych myself up before I network, So I'm more on the introvert side, when it comes to networking at least, right? So I need to get there early, be in the right mindset, as people start walking in, at least I've had a sense of the room. Just read the atmosphere, so it's beneficial for me. I always try and be there right on time.
Okay, so I'm going to the number 2 question now, and that is, I think this will come for Veronica. I'll just moved again. Is it better to write shorter or longer comments on LinkedIn posts? The algorithm seems to prefer longer, but you need to be sincere.
That's the truth of it, David. So the research done at the moment and the way the algorithm is designed is that when you're putting a comment on someone's post, if you just say congrats or well done, it doesn't rate that as highly. It's quite a judgy little algorithm. If you put a longer sentence that mentions something to the person, it will rate higher with the algorithm. But as David says, it needs to be sincere. If you don't know that person very well, it's hard that you really can't write a long comment.
Okay, let's go to a different question. I'll ask this one. I'll pick Nancy for this one. What are good ways to stay in touch with new contacts without making them feel like you're trying to sell them something?
That's a very good question, David. I think as we all mentioned, that relationship currency takes a little bit of work, right? So you do have to, after that initial connection, you do have to keep in touch. I like to schedule just, as I net with people the first time and we've got some sort of, chemistry, I like to ask them on the spot, right? Would you like to meet up as a follow-up meeting every quarter? If it's internal to my organization, I like putting, one-on-ones, frequent one-on-ones. But I think as you schedule those follow-ups, it's also important to have a set agenda because people just don't want you to meet with them for the sake of talking, right? So I think you can naturally, once you've got a chemistry with someone, you can naturally work it into the conversation on any follow-up connections that can be made there.
David, anything to add?
Yeah, I tend to actually, when I send something to someone, I say, "Is it okay if I can contact you again in 3 months?" Because usually not much has happened in the time span, but you want to keep in touch. So I just sort of say either that, or I'll say if it's okay, I'll contact you in 3 months. Be presumptive about it, and that way, you put a note in your task list or whatever. You just keep following up with them, and sometimes I'll let it go longer after that if this doesn't feels like anything. If they start saying, well, actually, I'd like to talk to you in a month's time, take the opportunity.
Yeah. David, you bring up a very good point, though, because one thing that I've found is that when you ask people for help or contact, people are really responsive in the first few days or maybe a week after you've brought it up. But people get so much stuff happening, they forget about it. They don't really necessarily forget about you, but it's good to remind them. So having a follow-up is good, whether it's a job search or contact. And if you keep chipping away and are pleasant about it, I think you'll get good responses. Veronica, your thoughts?
I think that's true, David. It's yeah, in chipping away in a friendly manner. You don't want to be that annoying person. But I find too, it's true. We get so busy and we get so caught up, and the best of intentions are there. I do reach out and reconnect occasionally. Funnily enough, just happened earlier today with a contact I made, and we're going to an art museum together later, and it's a business contact, but we've also worked out that we're two Australian girls in London and we don't know many people. We want to go and do some things, and we both enjoy museums, books, and art. So we find that when we do meet up, it's still building that relationship. We still talk about our careers, but we're also getting to know each other on that deeper level. And so we follow up. So I find that the follow up is good. Every time I contact my friend, she says, "Oh, I'm so good to hear from you. I was thinking about it." And then I don't feel like I'm that annoying person. But yeah, you do have to chip away just a little bit because everybody gets busy.
Okay, and our next question is tagged for David Freeman. David, you discussed not eating, but what if you're really hungry?
Okay. So this happens to me all the time. I will just, if it's in the middle of the thing, I'll just grab something, dry cracker or two or something like that, eat it. And that will tide me over. Don't have alcohol, obviously, on an empty stomach. So I'll do something, just put something quickly in my mouth, chew it, and get back to the game. I do want to recommend people avoid spanakopita and other products with spinach, because you never know where they're going to end up on your teeth. And the last thing you want is bits of green on your teeth when you smile.
So next question. I guess, Veronica, you may know this. Are there any stats on how people get jobs, i.e. percent from networking versus LinkedIn versus recruiters? How valuable is the LinkedIn and networking experience?
I'll have to pull the stats up and I'll be able to get back to someone on that. There definitely are. What I would find is that it's becoming more and more prevalent. One of the things I experienced myself personally recently was I couldn't find a recruiter who wanted to meet for coffee. And this was mind-blowing because earlier in my career, this is what you did. You met for coffee. And when I spoke to them and I said, "Why don't you have a budget to go for coffee anymore? I'll buy the coffee." And they explained that they were so busy going through everything that was coming from the LinkedIn searches and from the algorithms that they were spending a lot of their time responding and going through that. And that leads me to believe that potentially that online presence is becoming more valuable, but also having to be targeted about how you do it, because those cheeky little algorithms are quite selective, and it means that you've really got to focus on those keywords, putting those in that about section and even in your experience sections, just to make sure that your name is rising to the top of the list. But I wouldn't discount getting to know the recruiters either if you can.
Okay, and I would add, I think, Veronica, that it also depends where you are in your journey, right? Because I think when you're younger in your career, you've got a lot more potential, and recruiters are more interested in placing people who are maybe 2 to 5 years post-qualified. But as you get older, personal experience, it shifts more to networking and who you know and who you contact. I don't know if that is similar. Let's go to Nancy for some input.
I tend to agree with that, David. Definitely similar. Yeah, tend to agree with that.
Mr. Freeman?
I have not had the need to consult with recruiters recently, and I don't think I'll have that need in the future.
I think that is fair enough. I will say, to add to that networking opportunities and just staying in touch does make a difference. From a personal story, when I was with a startup company, we had a recruiter we worked with to recruit for us. And then when we finished at that company, I went to talk to him about maybe working with them and doing recruitment. what happened was before I actually got on site, they'd had a meeting before I got there. When I got there, another of his colleagues had seen my profile. It perfectly matched something he was looking for. And that's how I ended up as the practice area lead for North America for Cognos, right? It really depends on a bit of luck, but also following up with people you trust, right? So now let's go to our next question. Let's see. So, Veronica, where's the best place to put my keywords on my LinkedIn profile?
I'd definitely suggest doing it in more than one place. Keep under your name that title part more to roles that you either are wanting to do or have done, and that's what you're known for. But your keywords, I'd put them in the about section, and I'd scatter those through the paragraph if you're writing a paragraph, or even in dot points. You can list out core strengths as a dot point system. But then also in your experience for each of your roles, you do get the ability to add in a small paragraph there. I would keep it to the impact that you made in those roles, as opposed to telling the life story of the career journey in each of those roles on LinkedIn. But that's a good place to insert those keywords as well, so that you're getting them reused more than once in your profile.
Excellent. I think this was one for Nancy. So, Nancy, how do you pivot your personal brand for a significant career change, i.e., moving from being an auditor to being an executive coach?
That is a good question. I've never had to do it, because I've always been within the finance career. But if just off the top of my head, I think it's just about, first of all, to Veronica's point, is you need to pivot your social media. I think it's just firstly start with the social media, right? Pivot your profiles towards that next career stage, which is the executive coaching, and then gradually start to target, I mentioned a little bit about networking, right? Target industry events, etc., that is really just linked to that executive coaching. So I think it's just practically going through the steps, right? And then ensuring that you're pivoting across those four key points to that new career area. That's how I'd advise that.
Okay, and I'm going to ask the next question to each of you in turn, because it'd be interesting. So recently a contact joked, I don't know, that doesn't sound like a joke, that accountants don't have a personality. Any tips for events with non-accountant attendees and people struggling with interaction? Let's start with David.
Well, firstly, accountancy is regarded as historically as an introverted profession. I don't think that's true personally, but I think you just have to be yourself out there, and if you're encountering those people around the edge of the room, they're probably the introverts, and you can try and bring them out of their shell. They're just waiting for someone to talk to. So I think at the end of the day, particularly accountants who have made it to the United States, I think that they tend to be a little more extrovert. You had to be to survive in this country. So I do think that it's a matter of, just putting yourself out there and helping introverts convert to extroverts.
Okay, so Nancy, do you want to go next?
I mean, I tend to disagree. Accountants have fun. I'm an accountant. I have fun with my team, so I tend to disagree. I think as you go to networking events and the only accountant there, right? I think there's value in educating people about accounting. It's not just numbers, right? There are a lot of extroverts in accounting. So it's just really looking at the points that are interesting about accounting, right? That you can bring out as you do that elevator pitch that David Freeman talked about, that you can bring out in that elevator pitch, right? What beyond the numbers and crunching the numbers do we as accountants do, right? What value do we add to a business? That's exciting. That's interesting, right? As accountants within the finance function. So I think it's just, tailoring the message that you have there to bring out the interesting aspects of accounting, and then just be yourself, as David said, right? As you do that. I think all of that, your personality will shine through with highlighting as well our profession. The great things about our profession as accountants.
So Veronica, the tiebreaker, you've had one view from David, a slightly different one from Nancy. Where do you fit?
Well, of course, we have incredible personalities. Look at us. But I get where this is coming from because I think mostly when we've been observed, and I say this as a generalization, people might think we're the shy, introverted type of people. If you're feeling that way, and I'm going to steal one of David Freeman's recommendations here, is the more that you get good at asking genuinely interested questions about other people, becoming truly curious about them, it stops you feeling that need to talk about yourself and any insecurities that you might have about, oh gosh, I might seem boring. But also the other person is enjoying themselves so much in telling you about them that they're really then realizing now I've done this with people where in fact I haven't actually mentioned much about myself at all. But the conversation's been so great that the person's walked away going, I had a really great chat with you, Veronica. And I'm thinking, yeah, this was wonderful. And so there's that opportunity too, that just becoming curious about learning about other people can really help with that conversation. And then if that person is so happy talking about any of their interests, of course, we're not going to seem boring.
Okay. So I like the next question very much because I've worked in a number of different countries globally, and I know many on this call have as well, right? So the question and the answer is it needs to change and flavor for each event, right? But the answer is about culture and cultural settings, and does everything we say apply to everything the same? The obvious answer is not, but let's have Veronica start on that one first.
Well, hang on a minute. With the question, can you repeat that one, David? I've
about
missed
culture.
The question.
It's about when you're doing the do's and don'ts of networking, how do you flex it for different cultures? If you're having a meeting in the US versus the UK versus Germany versus Singapore versus Australia versus China, for example.
Okay, yes. Well, I must admit, as Aussies, and hi to all the Aussies on the call, we're known for being quite direct. We're known for being very friendly, but I definitely do occasionally quite straightforward, and that can sometimes offend people from cultures who may be a little more diplomatic. One thing I've learned is to try and get a real lay for the land and understand a little bit about the room. For example, I've noticed here people are quite happy with silence. And so when I'm having those conversations in the UK, as opposed to when I was living in the US, I find that I don't have to talk as much. People are happy having a quite succinct conversation, getting a feel for me, and then politely saying, "Oh, thanks," and moving on. And it's not them being rude. They're just they've got what they needed, and they're moving on. And then also too, I've learned certain topics to stick to conversations that are considered polite. And if in doubt, just have a listen. When you're joining a new conversation, have a listen to what the others are saying in the group, and then join in when you feel a little more confident. Those would be my tips.
Nancy, you've moved from South Africa to the US. Do you approach networking differently in different ways depending on country?
It's a good question. I mean, the reality is we do have cultural differences, right? But I think what has worked, and I'm not being cliche, what has worked for me is just being myself, right? Authenticity transcends any cultural differences is what I found. We're all different, but we do have similarities, just, on a level of humanity. And so trying to find things in common with people, right? Even before you start having those networking conversations, for me, is always very helpful, right? So just be authentic, be true to yourself, find ways to connect with people on a human level first. Again, we do have differences, right? But find those similarities that can make you connect, right? And then take the relationship to the next level in terms of networking.
Okay, and I know I'm not going to get through all the questions we've got here. So one thing to flag is that when people exit this webinar, there'll be a survey, and at the end of it, there's a comment section. If you have a question we haven't answered here and you'd like it answered, please put it in there alongside your name, and I'll get it to our presenters. So moving to our next question, Do you have any suggestions on books to read on networking and personal branding? David Freeman.
Yeah, I do have a recommendation. I can provide the information of that to you, David, and you can post it, assuming the book is still in print. It was actually a lady who came to one of our chapter events and spoke about networking and had a book about it. The book was a very easy read, and I learned a lot from it, and
Okay.
it's always been very helpful.
No, I can add that when we post the edited webinar online. I can add in any additional comments. Nancy, any books to recommend?
I would recommend a book by a lady called Carla Harris that's called Expect to Win, where she really talks about strategies of how to survive within the work environment. And then there she talks a little bit about, the concepts of relationship currency, performance currency, that really all factors into what we talked about around personal branding. So let's Expect to Win by Carla Harris.
Veronica.
It's not a purely networking book, but it's one that I've come across recently. It's not even a new book. Michelle Obama's book, The Light We Carry, is about relationships, and she talks about having a friendship and a networking group that you would have at your kitchen table. And so this is more than once you've established a tighter knit network and built really significantly close groups of people, but having that well-rounded group of people that, for example, would sit around your kitchen table and the types of conversations that you would have. And sometimes you'll have people you'll go to for a work question, you'll have people you'll go to for more of a life question, or even somebody with a question about perhaps your children or your family. And so I think this stems a deeper level of networking and understanding how those networks can then transform into friendships that can help you throughout all types of struggles in your life. So I'm a big Michelle Obama fan. So frankly, I enjoyed that book.
Right. So I'm going to get to our wrap question shortly, but Veronica, I've had something come in that is specific to you, saying you mentioned there are other apps aside from LinkedIn that CAs are utilizing. Which ones are you aware of? If you could just mention that briefly.
One of the ones, she's an Australian CA, is becoming known for it on TikTok. And I can find Natalie's profile. So for any CA ANZ members, we had an article about Natalie in Acuity, and she does have it on her LinkedIn. You'll see her anywhere. She wears this lovely Barbie pink jacket, and she's breaking all kinds of stereotypes, but she's reaching a brand new audience on TikTok. There's also a young ACA here in London, Abby Foster, whose company eLent have made their own app. And that's actually helping with financial education to spread the news to people. And it's very exciting. Abby's got a profile. Abigail is her full name.
So Veronica,
on
perhaps
LinkedIn.
we do this because we're getting close.
Yeah, I could share that.
Perhaps you can share that and I'll put it on the website when we do the posting. So last question, and this is maximum 30 seconds each, since we're almost out of time. Can each of you share what the main message is you'd like to take the audience to take away? David Freeman.
Go out there, go network. It's important to your career today and tomorrow, but it's not something that you should ignore.
Veronica.
Simply that your LinkedIn profile isn't just for when you're job hunting. Don't let it lapse. Focus on it and use it as a reflection of that personal brand. And also it'll help you with the networking.
Nancy.
I would say just know the value that networking can bring to your personal brand. And then just two final words, just be intentional. Be intentional about building your personal brand and about networking.
So let's move to our fifth and final poll. We've got 1 minute left. While you're answering the poll, I'd like to thank our presenters and panelists, David, Nancy, and Veronica. Also, thanks to all of you attending today's event. Before you exit, please fill in the feedback survey, add in any questions that you'd still like us to answer. As stated at the outset, we will be following up within 2 to 3 weeks with digital badges for all attendees and CPE certificates for members who are also US CPAs and have qualified by answering our polls. We would also like to highlight our next event, which is a webinar with the Advisory Board Centre on Global Advisory Board Trends and Opportunities for Accountants and Firms. This will be on November the 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and the next day, 9 a.m. in Brisbane, Australia. So closing out the poll results, let's see what we have. Given what you heard today, do you feel better equipped to network? And we have 91% yes and 9% about the same. So with that, thank you. And for now, goodbye.